Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at something a little bit different down at the Florida Railroad Museum between Willow and Parrish, Florida. Now they do events all year long, but today would be something a little bit more private, as they would be testing a piece of equipment that hasn't run in almost 6 years. It's 8 a.m. on May 22nd, 2024, and the morning silence has yet to be broken by the Florida Railroad Museum CF7 number 204. This is FRRM's Willow Yard, where their power and passenger cars used for their weekend runs are stored and serviced. 204 is one of a few locomotives the museum maintains for their runs, and today it'd be the backup power for our testing. So much for the morning quiet. Built in April of 1950 as a freight F7 for the ATSF, this 4-axle EMD would be part of Santa Fe's rebuild program in the mid-1970s, transforming this engine from a sleek, almost aerodynamic locomotive to a boxy switcher retaining its F7 components with a converted cab, hence the C that prefixes the model name, CF7. The museum has owned this locomotive for a handful of years now, operating on their revenue train since 2020. Before the 204 came along, Jeep 7 8330's, seen in the background here, was a main puller on the line with help from GP10 8330. Ever since I can remember, this locomotive has been here, donated to the museum in 2010. A year later, it would ironically pull a train that I rode for my 4th birthday party in 2011, my first memories at this museum. We'll get into the more in-depth history of this locomotive later, but for now, just know that this thing's been offline since late 2018. Due to engine failures and a lack of funds to afford the necessary parts for its restoration, the 8330 has sat in Willow for 5.5 years. This was until October 2022, when plans to restore the old Jeep surfaced. Because of the museum's busy holiday season and mandatory track work commencing soon after, 8330 would have to wait till the following summer to begin its second chance. And now, a year later, in May 2024, it's ready to go. But not without quite the extensive rescue job, if you will, by a handful of the museum's finest.
So, first and foremost, we replaced the entire block. Because when excess moisture built up in the old one in 2018, and it spilled over into a piston head, it blew up. So, it ended up bending the crankshaft. So the entire motor was basically shot at that point. We actually still have the old motor. It's over in our event field. It's painted gray, and it matches a diagram that's next to it to show where all the fluids go, like water and oil and whatnot. So this is a model 567C. These are usually found in full body like F7 motors. But for what we need, it works just fine. It's about 1,500 horsepower generator, and these motors are basically plug and play. All of the components that link up in the back of the motor for oil and fuel and whatnot basically match the 645 that came out. This is your governor cable. So when you move the throttle in the cab, it sends electrical signals through these wires to the governor, and there's a wobble plate inside the governor that moves with solenoids and tells the engine how to respond, how much fuel to put through the injectors, and pretty much, runs the engine that way. However, this entire cable was frayed and shot all the way through. So all these wires had to be redone. Everything from these connectors through are new wires, and that's a new governor cable as well.
That's right, to get this thing back up and running, the hood would come off, old prime mover out, and a new one put in, along with a plethora of other issues and problems that have been solved over the past few months. The plan today was simple: get the 8330 back on the main for its first ever test run since restoration. It'd be paired with the aforementioned CF7 number 204 just in case things went south and if assistance was required to get the locomotive back to the shops. First things first, the check valves would be opened and engine cycled through 4 to 5 times. This rotates the pistons, which will blow out any excess moisture that builds up over time in the chambers. Altogether, it's called the blowdown process in railroad jargon. The valves are then closed and system primed, which sends a fresh load of fuel into the injectors, meaning the engine is ready to be started. And at 8:15 this morning, that's exactly what would happen as the 8330 would start and warm up. A couple last-minute checks would be done by the crew, walking around the engine, checking each truck and axle for any defects. This is routine for all railroaders, done on every short line and Class 1 alike. Dakota now walks down the yard tracks toward the main, guaranteeing all switches are lined for 8330 to move out of the yard and onto the main line to meet its partner today waiting behind. 10 minutes after the startup, and she's off, crawling out of the yard at Willow and towards the old Seaboard main line, where the original Tropicana juice train used to pass at 50 miles an hour.
Up and riding 8330.
With the switch line for the main now, 8330 would begin backing down towards 204, making for an interesting shot as a colorful lash up was created.
All right, 8330, drop 3. I'm up and riding in the clear on track. You're lined up. Bring back my way.
From here, all that was left to do was inspect, check, and go. The 204 would be online, but not pushing, opting to be towed, and only utilized if something were to go wrong, which, spoiler, nothing ever did. I'd moved down the tracks a little ways, close to where the Florida Power and Light, or FPL for short, maintains a spur track for their Willow power plant. The plant never received coal like Big Ben, instead getting generators, although their spur is now used mostly for storage. Ironically, the entirety of the museum's trackage is owned by FPL, leased to the FRRM for years now. As 8330 approaches on its quasi-maiden voyage, you can see the signals in the background. The signal bridge is one of ACL's old ones from Lakeland, donated to the museum a few years back, and well maintained ever since. The semaphore is from somewhere in Central Florida, as a while ago, these used to be everywhere. Framed nicely by the old Seaboard whistle post sign here, the chase would begin as I'd backtrack to US 301 to beat the train down to Dickey Road, the only road crossing on the 6-mile stretch to Parrish. An interesting note here, although not really seen in the video, is the insane amount of flies that are here. While much better than mosquitoes or horseflies, these things were annoying, and potatoes are to blame. Harvested down the road are red potatoes, something I didn't even know was grown in Florida. Across the tracks on the east side of the crossing are cow fields where defective or ugly potatoes are fed to the cows via dump truck. Going over the crossing, the produce tends to spill over the edges, which is why there's so many rotting potatoes on the ground in the ditch around here, a feast for insects. According to the locals though, this is only something that occurs in the months of April to June, the prime potato harvesting season down here. The flies wouldn't bother 8330 or the crew, as they'd be running good now, cruising south now over halfway to Parrish. Milepost SW860 is Parrish, the southern end of the maintained trackage here. Construction on the new gift shop and track enclosure is complete. Now the tracks must be laid and landscaping done. About 1,000 feet from the switch here, there'll be another that will break off into 3 or 4 tracks that'll dead end inside the new building, a replica of an ACL structure typically seen in tropical Florida. But that's a project that'll be started soon, but no one knows when. The switch that's already here and will be used today is the old Seaboard's Parrish house track, similar to the installments like Bradenton, Dade City, and in Brooksville. The track was built to serve the platform where the old depot once stood, now replaced by a wooden deck built to help passengers board and disembark from their train. Today it'd be used to turn the engines around to have 8330 lead back to Willow. 35 minutes after departing Willow, our train comes into view, passing the switch and pulling up right to the platform area. To reorientate the locomotives, the 204 would be uncoupled and moved into the house track and tied down next to the 8330.
Don't do anywhere in there. 3 steps, 204. 3 steps in. You're good up against the stock rail. I'm going to clear, drop my 3, bring her in. Copy that.
With 204 in, they grab the 8330 and pull it down to the switch, diverging him also into the house track in order to recouple to 204, now behind it, which allows for it to lead long hood forward back north to Willow.
Alright, 8330, you're lined up. Drop 3 in the clear, lined up, coming 2.
Finally, 8330 notches up out of the house track and back onto the main. All that's left to do is realign the switch for the main and take off northbound. Back to Dickey Road at milepost 858. The train would be notching up once again, cresting the small hill that raises the tracks up to the crossing and then gently lowers them back down on the other side. And one last shot at Willow. We're set up at the north end of the runaround track, where, as the name implies, trains run around their consists in order to back into Willow as a stub and terminal on the line. Breaking off within the runaround track is the spur to FP&L. As I said earlier, they did at one point receive generators by rail, which is why the tracks between Parrish and Ellington and Palmetto were maintained for so long. I believe the last time tracks between Parrish and Palmetto were used, though, was sometime in 2014, but that's just a guess. For now, the museum's 6-mile stretch is in some of the best shape it's been in for a while, now carrying their newest project, which I'm happy to say just completed its first successful trial run. Last order of business today would be to park 8330 back in the Willow yard and tie her down. Before the crew could start checking the motor and fix any issues found during the run, they'd have to let the engine cool down significantly, which would take a few hours. This would give me time to look around the engine and get some more history on this 70-year-old locomotive.
So, 8330 was built in 54 as a GP9B for the Union Pacific. So that means it was a cabless unit that was MU to other locomotives, so it would simply provide extra horsepower. You could not control the locomotive individually. You needed a separate motor to operate it. In 1977, it was part of the Illinois Central Gulf's Paducah rebuild program that took engines such as the GP9B or other various Jeep models and remade them into various GP10s and GP11s. This is a variant of the GP10 that was rebuilt from GP9B number 183B for the Union Pacific, and it's retained the number 8330 ever since it was built for the ICG, or rebuilt for the ICG, at which point they added the cab, control stand, and all the other pieces that allow this locomotive to be its own independent motor. So then it ran on the ICG until they became the Illinois Central, so this eventually got Death Star black paint. And you can actually, just pointing this out to me, it's interesting, you can still see the indentations from the Death Star logo on the nose. That was pretty interesting to me. But after that, at some point, my memory's a little foggy here, but at some point after that, it was given or sold, or maybe the latter, to the Knoxville and Holston River Railroad, I believe. They were a short line freight railroad somewhere around Tennessee. And they ran it until, I think, somewhere around 2003, when this was donated to the Inland Lakes Railway that used to run excursions up the old Florida Central line in Eustis, Florida. So they ran excursions until 2009, I believe, when they had to shut down due to reasons even I don't know. But by proxy, they gave this 3 different paint schemes while Inland Lakes had it. They had a orange and green that was almost resemblant of a sort of BNSF look, a red and yellow that was symbolic to the Inland Lakes, and then right before they shut down, they painted it into this blue and white scheme, and then the museum got it as a donation in 2010. So they've had it ever since, and then, you know, mechanical things happened, and now we're doing mechanical things to fix it. So now she runs again as a very famous Paducah GP10, as there's not a whole lot, I mean, there's still a fair number of them around, but I've seen them be fairly idolized for whatever reason that may be. But she's a good runner. We got some work to do still yet, but we'll get her going.
Before leaving for home, I'd get a sneak peek at some more of the museum's upcoming projects, including some they've already begun. Currently in the paint shop is a Norfolk and Western caboose. The museum planned to repaint it blue after its years of service as a red caboose, which were its original colors on the N&W. Presently, it's getting N&W blue, which it'll wear well for many years to come. Around lunchtime, my day out would end, as we'd start heading off for lunch and the hour drive back north to home. Thank you to all who stuck around for this one. I hope those interested in 8330 were able to find this one and watch it. We're all extremely excited to see it back online after years of idle storage. I'll try my best to keep y'all updated on it too, between the work that it still needs and even the future paint scheme and all that jazz. So at milepost SW854 in Willow, Florida, I'll see you all again somewhere trackside. But until then, this is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.